Hey guys, and welcome back. I've had this bike for a little over 3 months now. And today we finally review the new 2022 Yamaha R7. We're going to talk about what kind of bike is this and who is it for.
Here is engine specs. We got a inline 2 689cc cross-planed engine, just like the MT-07, and that's what we get that crazy cool iconic sound from. The sound that everyone loves that comes from the MT-07, we get it right here in this Yamaha R7, and with an exhaust system on it, man, does this bike sound fantastic. If you guys haven't seen the installation of the Ocean Mirror I did, I'll link that up here so that you guys can watch it and check it out. We also have a 6-speed transmission with a slipper clutch, and slipper clutches, in my opinion, are huge. They are a huge deal. My first motorcycle was a CBR 600RR, and let me tell you, that thing was terrible. If you were to downshift too fast, you would completely lock up that rear end, and it'd scare the crap out of you, especially if you're a new rider, which I was, and I shouldn't have been on that bike for one, let alone not have a slipper clutch or ABS or any of those kinds of things. And for suspension, we have, in my opinion, I would say a little above adequate. I would say maybe like the MT-07 has adequate suspension for the style of type of bike that it is. I would say this one's just maybe a little above, kind of like this mid-range super sport style bike. I'd say it does have good adjustability, compression, rebound, dampening in the front, and I believe it's just compression and rebound dampening in the back. So there's enough adjustability there to actually do something with the suspension at least. I will definitely say it is important to get it set up, and the reason why I would say that is I'm having a hard time already with my front tire, which I have with almost every motorcycle I've ever bought, and at about 2,900 miles on that tire, I'm already getting bad wear spots on the tire. So the tire is definitely is not going to last me 8,000 miles by any means. In fact, I probably should replace it now, just simply because when I lean the bike over, I can feel the bike going up and down because the tire is wearing wrong. So the fix to that would be either making sure that your tire pressures are always good to go, and then the main way to solve that problem would be to ensure that the suspension is set up for your height or your weight. And the annoying part about that is you really should set it up for what you commonly wear. Like, I commonly wear a backpack with a laptop and camera gear and stuff like that because, well, I'm a camera nerd. So that's an important thing to do. I'm definitely going to try and figure out how to set my own sag on this bike. So ultimately, the suspension is good enough for this bike, in my opinion. Of course, it could be better. Öhlins makes some amazing stuff out there. If I was constantly at the track and really, big into that scene, I probably would do that. I don't see myself doing that right now, not for a while. As for brakes, we do have Brembo Masters, which is really cool, but the rest of the brake system is not all that great. I would say, just like the suspension, it is adequate, because keep in mind this is a budget style bike, and that's pretty much what you're going to get at budget style bike. I mean, this thing's under 10 grand, and we are getting a lot of motorcycle for $9,000. It's crazy. We have a 3.4 gallon tank, which puts this bike about 414 pounds wet, and we're getting roughly, it says you'll get 58 miles per gallon. I'm getting a little bit less than that, but it's still at least in the 50s, so which I think is pretty dang cool. Another really cool feature of this bike, which for some reason is still uncommon on motorcycles, is LED light. You know, why wouldn't there be LED lights on every single motorcycle? Like, the biggest problem is it's hard to see a motorcycle, and then they cheap out and put garbage lights on them. So that's really cool. This bike has LEDs all around. I also installed those TST Industries flush mount turn signals, and those are LED, have a nice little blue glow. I didn't need a relay to make the rest of the lights work with my LEDs because it's already LED. So that was a really neat little upgrade to be able to do, and a cool thing about the bike to be able to come with with all LEDs across the board. Since we're stuck behind this car, let's talk about ergonomic. I think it's a hard thing to portray to people that have not been on a super sport motorcycle yet. And the reason why I call it a super sport and not a sport bike is, in my opinion, when you're talking about a sport bike, you're talking about a Ninja 650. You're talking about a CBR 650, not the 600 versions of those motorcycles, the 650 version. Those generally have higher handlebars, lower foot pegs, more forward foot pegs, shorter seats, so you ultimately sit inside of those motorcycles, and they may as well be a sport naked bike because they just have pretty fairings around them, which in my opinion makes those a sport styled motorcycle, not a super sport. A super sport, in my opinion, is more of an aggressive race styled motorcycle, and not just that, it would be also a mid-range race motorcycle like a 600. And then your thousands that are race bikes are super bike, while your 1000cc, your CB 1000 or your Ninja 1000, the non-Rs, the non-race versions, the non-race replicas, those would be still considered a sport bike in my opinion. Just to clarify that, so you understand what I'm saying when I call this thing a super sport. It has the engine and power of a sport bike, and it is designed to be a race motorcycle. That's why I think this is the best super sport you could buy for the streets, because it doesn't have that high-end power where you're just ripping. It allows you to have all that grunt and fun down low for the corners. You don't have to be high in the rev ranges going fast as hell to have a really good time out on the streets and on these back roads. You don't need that high-end power. So after that tangent there, back to the ergonomics of this motorcycle. It is a very aggressive, you are leaned forward, your butt is up in the air, your foot pegs are back and they're high, and your hands and your clip-ons, and they're called clip-ons now because they're not handlebars on top of your triple tree, they're mounted to the actual forks of the triple tree, and they call them clip-ons, and they stay under that triple tree, which is what's also forcing you forward into this position of, well, racing. So this is by no means a comfortable position or a motorcycle that you want to take on a ride that is longer than an hour, in my opinion. Now don't get me wrong, I've put 8 hours in a day. I'm Central California, and I rode this thing basically to the northern part of California in one day, one ride, could barely walk the next day. These are not a comfortable position for you to realistically be commuting for any longer duration of time than maybe an hour. That's obviously personal opinion, personal preference. I just want you to know, but let's face it, these things are beautiful. We all want them because they look insanely badass and they are so much fun to ride in corners. Now, if you wanted to compare the Ergos to, like, say, other super sports, I would say this is more like a CBR 600. It's aggressive, but it's not insane. It is not as bad as the R6 is. The R6 was probably the worst, the most aggressive feel on a motorcycle that I have personally sat on. So to me, it sits right there in between that R1. I would say even from sitting on the R1, I kind of felt that seemed a little less aggressive to me than the R6. I would say this more fits that. It's just a considerably smaller bike. And what I mean by smaller is where your knees are. What makes and helps this become a little bit more confidence inspiring while you're riding it is the fact that it is a little bit narrower. Your legs fit absolutely perfect under this tank. I think the best way I could describe this to you guys is I used to have a Kawasaki Ninja 636, and then I also had a Ninja 400, and I believe that was a 2018. The Ninja 400 was a very narrow bike, and what was cool about that is it made you feel like you had a little more control over the motorcycle. You felt like you could squeeze a little bit tighter with your thighs on back roads, and when I took it to the track, I felt very comfortable and confident on that bike when I rode it. My 636, however, that gas tank and your legs, they were spread out, and it is a little bit less inspiring when you're riding it because of that. It was just a little bit fat. She was a little chunky. Now this bike sits right in between both of those. It's not quite as narrow as the Ninja 400, and it doesn't have the small tank like the Ninja 400. It actually has this lip that rolls out and around your legs, which is great, especially when you're leaning on the side of the bike and your butt is halfway off the seat. You're using that thigh to shove inside of that gas tank to help you feel more comfortable and connected to the motorcycle. That was a harder position for me to get into with my 636. I never felt 100% comfortable to really get my ass off the bike and get that knee down. But on my little 400, no problem whatsoever. Felt great. This bike, right in between both of them, it feels awesome. So there's that Ergonomics roll-up. Hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully it makes sense to you and you could apply it to the motorcycles that you have ridden in the past or sat on at the dealer, depending on which bike you want to buy. So with all those stats and everything rolled up, what does any of that even really amount to? What does that mean in fun factor? Am I going to like this motorcycle? I think the most important thing here is going to be, who is this motorcycle for? Because let's face it, it's not for everyone. You guys have all seen the fact that everyone complains about it because it's not the old R7 and it's not faster than an R6. And in my opinion, that doesn't matter. I knew what I bought when I bought this bike. I knew I was giving away power when I sold that 636 and bought this R7. There's multiple reasons. For me, that reason was I had that power in that 636, and you know what I did with it? I used it every chance I could, every time I got on the freeway. Multiple times on my way to work, I would hit 120, 140 multiple times per day just getting on the dang freeway. And yes, that's fun, it's exhilarating. Listening to those inline fours scream their little hearts out is just absolutely fantastic. Not gonna lie, not gonna say I don't miss it a little bit. When I bought this, I knew I was getting a low rev range, low powered motorcycle, but I had a pretty good feeling I was going to really enjoy back road riding without being in high rev ranges, meaning I could go into a corner a little low on throttle and not potentially in the right gear, but yet I could still open up after the apex and get enough power out of this bike to pick it back up. It's almost like it allows for mistakes when you're out on the road on back roads having a good time. If you over grab that front brake, trail braking into a corner, and you know you lost all your speed, you have enough low end grunt in this bike to just pick you back up and keep going. If you're not in the perfect gear on that Ninja 400, as you go into that corner, if you over brake just a little too much, you will not have enough power to get yourself out of that corner and enjoy that riding experience, because you'll have that heavy lag in the engine. So who do I think this bike is for? I would say you gotta kind of know what you want out of a motorcycle. Are you the guy that needs to go 140, 160 miles per hour every time you get on the freeway? Are you a straight line bomber, or are you a back road cruiser? Are you a drag racer guy, or are you a Formula One guy? Which one are you more interested in? Because this ain't no drag racer, but it is amazing on some back roads. And that comes to the beginner bike. Is this a beginner bike? And my answer to you is no, it's not a beginner bike. And the reason why I just straight say no to that response is because I don't know where you're at in your life or in your riding ability or your riding experience. Like, a good way to narrow it down or to put this would be, would I let my son ride this right now? He just turned 16. He's actually taking his motorcycle permit right now as we ride, and I would not let him ride this motorcycle as his first motorcycle. No way in hell. It's way too much power. And I have had him on dirt bikes for years. I know that he knows how to ride, but I still think this is too much power for, maybe the word would be, not as mature young person yet. So if you're, mid-20s-ish, or you're in your 20s now and you've rode motorcycles throughout your life, and maybe you've already had a 300 or a 400, obviously it's not a beginner bike at that point anymore, it's your next step up. I really think that that's where this motorcycle fits in the overall scheme of, should you buy this motorcycle? I think you should buy a Ninja 400 or a Z400 and learn on that motorcycle. Hell, that bike will still get you to 130 miles an hour if that's what you're itching to get. It'd take a lot longer to get you there, but those Ninja 400, I had no problem getting that thing up to 120. So you're going to get fun out of those bikes. Now, I don't know about an R3 or a CBR 300 or whatever. In my opinion, I don't think those bikes handle the freeway well enough. I think they just barely squeeze in and can accomplish the freeway at freeway speeds. But if you need to get around something or around a car or past a car, like, the power is just not there unless you're dumping a bunch of money into the engine. to try and soup that little 300 up, you might be able to get her to get wailing on you. But if you're older and you've ridden motorcycles on and off throughout your life, I would say you would be fine starting with this being your first street motorcycle. It's not crazy powerful. I mean, yes, if you grab the throttle in first or second gear and you cranked it, you're going to stand up the front tire. You don't have to double clutch it, it'll stand up. Not to say that I am very experienced at all with wheelies. The only time I usually wheelie is when I'm wailing through first, second, and maybe third. So I'm not exactly the wheelie guy. That's how I feel about it. If you're brand new, you've never ridden a motorcycle before, get yourself a 400. Ride it for a few years and sell it, and get yourself this R7 after that. You'll have such a better experience. Hell, I was pretty damn old when I bought my first motorcycle, and I had been riding for many a years. I grew up with a dirt bike. I had ridden 600s in the past from my brother who had one, through a buddy of mine back in the day that had one. I rode the Yamaha V-Star 650s. I've ridden motorcycles, and I still bought a CBR 600 for my first motorcycle, and that was a terrible idea. Granted, that is not exactly the best motorcycle you could buy. It is definitely probably narrowed down to one of the worst bikes you could probably buy for your first bike. No slipper clutch, no ABS, no traction control, absolutely nothing. It's a raw racing motorcycle. That CBR 600 was really cool and I absolutely loved it, and I should not have bought it. I should have bought something that I could have learned on, or that could have maybe helped me when I was retarded and grabbed too much brake or did stupid stuff, basically. But as a new rider, that's something that you're not going to be aware of. That power comes on fast, that power comes on hard, and if you're not experienced, your reaction skills are just not there for it. So starting on something like that is not necessarily a great idea at all. Even if you think you're going to be calm on the throttle, there's going to be times where you're not, and you're going to push your limits. That bike is going to outride your ass quick as hell, faster than you can imagine. So I hope you got something useful out of this. I know I kept saying I was going to do a review of this bike for from the first video I ever popped out on it, and it's just finally taken me this long to get her done. Everyone up front always loves their new toys. What are their new toys like after a long duration of time? That's a good question, and that question's coming for you guys. So thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next week.